The flames sputtered, their last golden tongues licking the cracked stones before collapsing into embers. Smoke curled in thin, ghostly ribbons toward the sky, carrying the scent of scorched earth and iron. The air was thick with the residue of chaos, a silence so absolute it pressed against the ears like a living weight. Alara's chest rose and fell with the rhythm of a storm restrained, her pulse echoing in the stillness. She did not move immediately, she did not speak. She simply stood, her wolf forming a shadow against the ruins, fur bristling with residual fire, claws sinking into the fractured ground beneath her. Beside her, Kale, wounded but unbroken, hunched over, his chest rising with shallow, ragged breaths. His muzzle trembled faintly as his amber eyes scanned the remnants of what had once been a sacred place. He had stood tall only moments before, a pillar of strength, but now he leaned into the agony of his injuries, the reality of their survival pressing in on him. Even through the haze of pain, he lifted a gaze toward her, and in that glance, a wordless acknowledgement passed between them: they had survived. They had survived what the world had tried to snuff out. The moon hung low, a pale, sickly disk in the storm-torn sky. Its light flickered through the clouds, dimming and shifting as if uncertain, as if the world itself hesitated to witness the scene. The ruins cast shadows long and fractured, clawing at the edges of the clearing, and each step they took sent tremors across the stone, echoing in the silent air. The earth beneath them shivered, a tremor so faint it could have been imagined, but no, the ground quaked again, and then again, rolling outward like the heartbeat of some ancient, slumbering entity. Alara's instincts prickled. Something was coming. Not another pack, not a shadow beast, not a rival alpha, something older, something more profound. Her fur bristled as she lowered her ears, senses straining. The air smelled wrong. Not like smoke, not like blood, but metallic, electric, and alive. A pulse of energy tickled the edges of her mind, a rhythm she recognized from the oldest legends whispered in the shadows of her childhood. The legends her pack had tried to erase. The ones they said were merely stories. From the rubble of the shattered shrine, a small figure emerged. At first, it seemed almost unreal, tiny, impossibly fragile, yet radiating a presence that made the hair along Alara's spine rise. The child's eyes were black as obsidian, reflecting the dim light of the dying moon, and silver veins traced intricate, winding patterns across its pale skin, pulsing faintly in cadence with the shivering earth. It did not cry, did not stumble. It walked steadily, deliberately, as if the stones themselves bent to its will. Alara's wolf instincts bristled, every muscle coiled with tension, but she did not move to strike, nor did Kale. They watched, suspended in disbelief and awe. The child's gaze lifted slowly, and when it fixed its eyes on her, a shiver raced down her spine. There was recognition there, yes, but also challenge, judgment, and something terrifyingly prophetic. "She is not the only one," the child whispered, voice impossibly small and yet carrying across the clearing with the weight of inevitability. The syllables lingered in the air, thick and heavy, wrapping around the broken stones and the quivering shadows. The voice was neither male nor female, neither wholly human nor animal, yet it resonated deep in Alara's bones, stirring the latent power she had spent years trying to suppress. Kale growled low in his throat, the sound vibrating through his chest, a warning as much to the child as to the unseen forces gathering beyond the ruins. He shifted, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon for movement, for threat, but there was only the trembling earth, the fading light, and the child who did not hesitate, who did not falter. Alara stepped forward, her claws scraping against the fractured stones, and the ground shivered more violently beneath her. Her breath came in slow, controlled bursts as she focused on the silver threads running through the child's skin. The patterns, they were old. So old. Older than any pack memory, older than even the ancient rites she had been taught to revere. They pulsed like a heartbeat, synced with her own, and she understood, suddenly, that this child carried the echo of something far beyond the ordinary, an awakening, a herald of power yet to be realized. The moon flickered again, dimming further, almost as if afraid to witness the truth. The ruins seemed to inhale, pulling shadows into their jagged edges, and the fire's last embers glowed weakly, like the pulse of a dying heart. Alara crouched slightly, her head lowered, eyes never leaving the child. Every nerve in her body screamed warning and awe in equal measure. She could feel the energy gathering, a magnetic pull that threatened to draw her closer, yet warned of danger. Her wolf form bristled with readiness, and yet she felt something almost familiar, in the child's presence. "She is not the only one," the voice repeated, firmer this time, carrying a weight that seemed to settle over the ruins like a mantle. "The true Alpha hasn't risen, yet." The words rolled through the clearing, vibrating against stone, earth, and bone, echoing in the remnants of the shrine like the tolling of a cathedral bell. Kale straightened slightly, the line of his jaw hardening as he exhaled through his nose, nostrils flaring. Even wounded, he sensed it, the threat, the promise, the prophecy that had suddenly clawed its way into their lives. He glanced at Alara, his amber eyes reflecting firelight and moonlight alike. There was understanding there, and caution, and a silent agreement that their journey had only just begun. The ruins were not safe, the prophecy was not complete. The power they had glimpsed was only the first thread in a tapestry far larger than either of them could yet comprehend. The child lifted one tiny hand, silver veins glimmering faintly against pale skin, and pointed toward the dark horizon, where clouds swirled unnaturally, drawn as if by the pull of some unseen force. Its voice, barely more than a whisper, resonated again. "She is not the only one, and the Alpha will awaken when the world trembles for it." A silence fell then, thick and absolute, as the ground quivered one last time. The moon's faint light bathed Alara and Kale in a pale, uncertain glow. The air smelled of iron, fire, and something older, something waiting. The ruins had witnessed devastation, survival, and transformation, but now, they were the stage for something far larger, far more terrifying, and far more beautiful than either of them could imagine. Alara lowered her head, her muzzle brushing the cold stone, and felt the pulse of the prophecy within her. The embers of her power stirred. Kale moved closer, pressing against her flank, his warmth a tether in the midst of uncertainty. Together, they listened, waited, and sensed the weight of inevitability pressing against them like the tide of an unstoppable storm. The child vanished as silently as it had appeared, stepping backward into the shadows of the rubble. Only the faintest shimmer of silver veins remained in the dimming moonlight. Yet the words lingered, etched into the air, into the earth, into their bones. "She is not the only one. The true Alpha hasn't risen, yet." And as the moon dimmed completely behind a clouded veil, as the wind whispered through jagged stones, as the world seemed to hold its breath, Alara and Kale, wounded, determined, unstoppable, knew one thing with absolute certainty: this was only the beginning. The fire had died, but the storm was coming. The prophecy was awakening. And the Alpha, hidden and forgotten, was yet to rise. The mist clung to the forest floor like a living thing, curling around the twisted roots and frozen underbrush, hiding shadows that threatened to swallow Alara whole. Every step she took sent tremors of uncertainty through her limbs, every breath she drew tasted of ice and fear, sharp and metallic. She did not dare glance behind her, not yet. But she could feel the weight of eyes tracing her, relentless, silent, and hungry. Then he appeared. Kale stepped from the fog as though it parted for him alone. His silhouette cut a figure of impossible strength against the gray haze, muscles taut under the weight of raw power, fur blending into the dark contours of his wolf form, eyes flickering like embers in a dying fire. There was danger in every line of him, danger in the tilt of his head, in the deliberate sway of his stance. Yet even in the threat he radiated, there was something more, a tether to a pain that ran deeper than the forest floor, a shadow of regret that softened the edges of his ferocity. Her heart stuttered, not with joy, not with relief, but with a tangle of fear and fascination. The forest seemed to shrink around him, the mist retreating as if the world itself respected his command. And then, impossibly, he spoke. Alara. Her name, carried across the chill air, sounded different coming from him. Weighted, intimate, like a key unlocking a part of her she had long tried to bury. The syllables brushed against her ears, gentle yet undeniable, and her body betrayed her. She froze, a sharp intake of breath catching in her chest, claws flexing against the frost-crusted earth. He knew her. He knew her. And that knowledge cut through her isolation like a blade of light through shadow. Without warning, he moved, swift, precise, a predator in motion yet calculated, measured. One hand reached, strong, certain, to lift her away from the jagged roots and hidden snare that threatened to ensnare her ankle. The trap snapped shut with a metallic clang behind her, but Kale's grip was steady, unwavering, anchoring her in the midst of chaos. She should have flinched, recoiled, rejected his touch. Her instinct screamed for distance, for survival, yet there was something magnetic in the pressure of his fingers, in the heat that radiated from him despite the chill of the mist. His gaze caught hers, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed. Conflicted eyes, amber and deep, layered with fire and restraint, studied her with a complexity that unsettled her. He was not merely rescuing her, he was assessing, judging, measuring. There was wariness in his stance, a wary calculation that made her pulse accelerate and her senses flare. She wanted to look away, to retreat into the familiar shadow of her fear, but the pull of him, of that silent, unspoken recognition, held her rooted. The forest itself seemed to breathe with them. The wind whispered through the skeletal trees, carrying the faint scent of pine, frost, and something metallic she could not name. Mist swirled around his feet, rising and falling as if in cadence with his heartbeat, as if the world itself bent subtly toward him, demanding acknowledgement of his presence. And still, he did not speak again, he did not need to. Every line of his body, every measured exhale, every subtle tension in his stance, conveyed the story of someone carrying shadows too heavy to lay down. He stepped closer, careful, deliberate, and the underbrush crunched beneath his boots. His eyes never left hers, and in that gaze was a storm, ferocity tempered by a flicker of something warmer, something almost tender, though it was buried deep beneath layers of caution. She wanted to read him, to unravel the riddles he carried, yet the forest seemed to warn her against it. She was a lone wolf herself, yet even in her isolation she felt exposed, stripped bare by the heat of his scrutiny. "Alara," he breathed again, voice low, edged with something unspoken, as if testing her, probing the defenses she had spent years constructing. "Do you trust me?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She could not lie, could not deny the flicker of hope, the spark of something she had almost forgotten in the long nights of running and hiding. Yet fear held her tongue, twisting her insides with the memory of betrayal, the memory of packs who had turned on her, the memory of power she barely controlled. To trust him would be to surrender a part of herself she had sworn never to give again. He did not wait for her answer. Instead, he extended a hand, not commanding, not demanding, but offering. The gesture was simple, yet heavy with unspoken promise. "Step forward, and you will not face the night alone. Step back, and the shadows will consume you." His eyes softened ever so slightly, revealing a glimmer of vulnerability hidden beneath the alpha exterior, a flicker of need for connection, for understanding, for a partner who could match the fire that burned too fiercely within him. And then the tension broke, briefly, violently. A branch snapped somewhere to the left, echoing through the stillness like a gunshot. Instinct surged in her veins, claws unsheathing, muscles tensing. Kale moved instantly, placing himself between her and the unseen threat, body low, eyes scanning, lips drawn back in a snarl that promised retribution for anyone foolish enough to strike. Her breath came fast, shallow, yet she did not retreat. There was a strange reassurance in his presence, an anchor she had not realized she needed. The mist shifted, curling around him like smoke around a flame, highlighting the angles of his jaw, the curve of his shoulders, the fierce determination in his stance. She felt the pull again, the dangerous allure of him, the spark of attraction she could neither name nor resist. His gaze lingered, sharp, probing, yet vulnerable beneath the surface. Every instinct screamed to flee, every muscle ached to fight, and yet some primal part of her quivered with recognition, with longing, with the almost unbearable tension of possibility. For a long moment, they simply stared, the silence between them charged with the weight of unspoken truths. He knew her story. He had seen her pain, her power, her solitude. And he had chosen to step forward, not as a savior in some storybook sense, but as someone fractured, someone dangerous, someone compelling beyond reason. She wanted to ask questions, why him, why now? But the forest pressed in around them, and words felt insignificant against the enormity of what had passed between them in a single glance, a single heartbeat. The fog swirled thicker, obscuring the path ahead, yet he held her gaze, steady, unwavering, an anchor in the chaos. And in that moment, in the haze of mist, frost, and uncertainty, Alara realized something she had never allowed herself before: she was not alone. Not entirely. Not while he stood here, watching, guarding, assessing, tempting. Her heartbeat slowed, her fear softened just enough to allow a fragile spark of trust, and with it, the first fragile seed of hope. Cale exhaled, the sound low and measured, and stepped slightly closer, bridging the distance that was at once intimate and terrifying. His eyes met hers, and for the first time since she had run through the frozen forest, she felt seen, not as prey, not as threat, but as someone alive, powerful, and worthy of attention. The forest held its breath with them. The mist curled tighter, the shadows deepened, and yet in that suspended moment, the world seemed to pivot, balanced on the fragile tension of trust and fear, attraction and restraint. And as Cale's presence enveloped her, as his eyes burned into hers with a mix of caution and curiosity, she knew something irreversible had begun. The night stretched on around them, dark and full of whispers, and in that quiet terror and wonder, the first thread of destiny entwined their fates. The lone wolf had found her alpha, and neither would ever be the same again. The forest seemed to exhale around her, carrying whispers of the past she had tried desperately to bury. Every snap of a frozen twig beneath her paws, every rustle of the wind through skeletal branches, reminded her of the nights she had spent alone, hunted by those who should have called themselves her family. Her silver flame, the forbidden mark of her bloodline, had always been a curse to them, a reason to brand her dangerous, untrustworthy, too powerful to live among ordinary wolves. Alara shook, though not from the cold. Memories rose like jagged shards in her mind. Whispers in the pack, eyes turned away, claws unsheathed not in play, but in fear. She remembered the way the elders had spoken her name, twisting it into venom. Danger, they had said. She will bring ruin to us all. And when she had shifted fully for the first time, the forest around her ablaze with silver sparks, they had turned. Their teeth had been bared, their jaws snapping at the air that once cradled her as one of their own. She had fled then, alone, until the snow and night had become her only companions. Loneliness had seeped into her bones, settling there with a cold permanence that even the fiercest hunts could not shake. Trust had become a luxury she could not afford. Every face she saw, every shadow that moved in the corners of her vision, carried the potential for betrayal. And yet, even in her solitude, a small, rebellious flicker of hope had survived, a fragile ember she refused to snuff out entirely. And now, in the frozen mist, Cale stood before her. The memory of his amber gaze, the way he had emerged from the fog without warning, pressed against her mind. He was danger, yes, but not the kind she had known all her life. There was something in him different from the wolves who had hunted her, something that dared to see her, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as someone who could be powerful, who could matter. Her body tensed, claws curling into the frozen soil beneath her, as a storm of conflicting emotions tore through her chest. Fear warred with fascination, mistrust battled with the need for connection, and a spark of longing she had buried deep for years threatened to ignite. She remembered the nights she had imagined someone coming for her, someone who would not see the silver flames and recoil, someone who could meet her fire with fire of his own. Could Cale be that someone? She did not dare hope too loudly, for fear would crush her if she was wrong. Her mind drifted backward, to the first time she had sensed the flame within herself. It had been a moment of awe and terror. The silver fire had coursed through her veins, illuminating her eyes, her fur, her very soul. The elders had recoiled, calling her an abomination. Her friends, those few she had dared to trust, had fled. Even the pack she had grown up with had barred her from the circle, leaving her to wander alone, hunted by whispers and claws alike. And yet, despite their fear and rejection, the flame had not dimmed. It had stayed, a stubborn pulse in the heart of her power. Kale's presence now forced her to confront memories she had tried to bury beneath layers of ice and shadow. He did not flinch at the slightest hint of her power, did not draw back when the silver sparks brushed against the tips of her fur. He did not recoil, did not judge. Instead, he had stepped forward, offering not safety, but recognition, acknowledgement of the truth she had carried alone for so long. The recognition was almost unbearable, and yet intoxicating. Alara's ears flicked back as she remembered every insult, every dismissal, every moment she had been made to feel lesser. But Kale had not whispered those words, he had not added to the weight she carried. Instead, he had silently, impossibly, lifted her from the snare of her own fear. And that silent acknowledgement, more powerful than any words, stirred something deep within her. Even as mistrust churned in her chest, curiosity gnawed at her. Who was this alpha who could walk into a fog-laden forest and command the air, the earth, and even her attention without a single gesture? Why had he watched her, known her name, reached out to her when everyone else had turned away? There was a depth in him, layers she could not yet see, but the edges glimmered with something familiar, a reflection of her own solitude, her own hunger for understanding. Her mind flicked back to her first exile, the hollow ache of being cast aside by those she had called family. She remembered the freezing nights, curled into herself for warmth, teeth gnashing not at predators but at ghosts of betrayal. The weight of abandonment had etched itself into her muscles, into her very spine, shaping her movements, sharpening her instincts. And yet, here, facing Kale, a tremor of something new threaded through her bones, possibility. The possibility that someone could see beyond the fire, beyond the bloodline, beyond the darkness she had come to accept as her only companion. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of pine, frost, and the faint metallic tang of danger. She did not flinch. Her body, trained by years of survival, was taut and ready, yet something softer threaded through her nerves, a quiet, dangerous hope. Kale's gaze never wavered, amber eyes tracking hers, silent questions hovering in the space between them. Can I be trusted? Can you see me? Will you allow yourself to be seen? The memory of countless nights alone resurfaced. She had hunted in silence, moved through forests where no one dared follow, shifted under moons that had never witnessed her true power. Every step had been calculated, every encounter a test of survival. Trust had been a lie, connection a trap. And yet, now, in the fog, with Kale standing firm against the shadows, she felt the tight grip of fear loosen ever so slightly, replaced by a fragile thread of courage. Her paws shifted against the frost, a subtle motion of readiness and hesitation. She could run. She could vanish into the night and remain the solitary wolf she had always been. But something in the tilt of Kale's head, in the faint lift of his brows, urged her forward, not recklessly, not blindly, but with cautious curiosity. His presence was not safe, and that fact thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. A flash of anger surfaced too. Anger at the pack who had betrayed her, at the elders who had branded her dangerous, at a world that had never seemed designed for wolves like her. But Kale did not stir that anger with judgment, he merely existed as a counterweight, a reminder that the world might hold someone capable of understanding, of standing beside her rather than opposing her. That recognition made her chest tighten, made her claws press harder into the frozen earth, and made her pulse race in a rhythm she had not felt in years. And for the first time in a long time, Alara allowed herself to breathe fully. The silver flame within her stirred, not in fear, not in defense, but in resonance with something external, something undeniable. Kale had seen it, acknowledged it, and not flinched. That was rare. That was dangerous. That was hope. Her mind whispered cautions, warnings trained into her by betrayal and solitude. But for every whisper of doubt, there was a spark of longing, a tether to possibility she could not ignore. Kale's presence, strong, haunted, unwavering, stirred a resonance she had long thought dormant, a pulse of connection, of recognition, of something that might grow into trust, into reliance, into more. The forest around them held its breath. The mist curled, the shadows stretched, and every sound. The snapping of frost, the whisper of wind, the distant cry of a predator, tugged at her instincts. Yet her focus remained fixed on him, on the Alpha who had appeared from nowhere, who had not recoiled at her power, who had extended the possibility of something she had almost forgotten, that she might not be alone, that she might not always have to fight with only the echo of her fire as company. And in that tension, in that space between fear and curiosity, Alara felt the stirrings of a fragile, trembling hope. Kale recognized her. He did not fear her. He might not even fully understand her yet, but he saw her. And that small, almost imperceptible acknowledgement cracked open the icy walls she had built around herself, letting in a flicker of warmth she had long thought impossible. The forest opened before them like a threshold to another world. The trees parted, not entirely by chance, but as if compelled by some ancient will, revealing a shrine carved from living stone, moss-covered and breathing with a quiet, enduring pulse. Moonlight draped the place in silver, glinting off jagged edges and illuminating runes etched deep into the rocks, worn by centuries of rain, wind, and time. The air smelled of wet earth, of smoke from long-extinguished fires, and of something older. Something almost alive, resonating with a heartbeat beyond the reach of mortal perception. Alara's fur bristled, not from fear, but from the thrumming energy that hummed beneath the soil. Her paws pressed against the ground cautiously, aware of every stone, every root, every whisper of wind. She could feel it, the tug of destiny that had long haunted her dreams, the sense that every step she had taken since her exile had led here, to this place where the past and future collided. The silver flame in her veins stoked uneasily, awakening to the call of something vast and unnameable. Kale moved beside her, careful, deliberate, yet alert. His amber eyes reflected the faint moonlight, scanning the edges of the shrine, the undergrowth, the shadows that seemed to twist unnaturally around them. Even he, who had faced rival alphas and shadow beasts with calculated confidence, seemed to sense the weight of the place. He exhaled slowly, a low rumble that vibrated through the forest and against the pulse of her heartbeat. "This place, it's alive," he murmured, voice rough but odd, as though speaking the truth aloud could somehow disturb the balance of the shrine. Alara's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, to voice the same awe he did, but words felt inadequate. She was small in the presence of history, of prophecy, of a power that dwarfed her alone but seemed to hum in resonance with her own flame. Her gaze swept across the carvings, symbols she could not read but somehow understood. Whispers of legends, of old pacts, of stories her pack had forbidden her to know, stirred faintly in the air. And through those whispers, she heard it, a murmur, almost imperceptible at first, curling around the edges of her mind, brushing against her soul. The one with the silver flame, the child of the alpha blood. Her claws dug into the soft moss as her pulse quickened. The words were not merely echoes, they were a call, a beckoning, a summons to a destiny she had never dared to embrace. Doubt clawed at her chest like a relentless wind. Who am I to be the one? She thought. I am alone. I am hunted. I am barely surviving, barely controlling the power that terrifies everyone, including myself. How could I be the answer to a prophecy that spans centuries? The forest seemed to answer in whispers again, the leaves rustling as if in agreement with the unseen voice. Moonlight flickered through the boughs, catching the silver sparks of her flame in a faint shimmer across her fur. She could feel the energy, old and vast, coiling around her like threads of a web she had only just begun to perceive. The pull of it was magnetic, impossible to resist. Her claws twitched with anticipation, her ears pricked toward unseen movements, her tail swishing with tension that was not fear, but expectancy. Kale's presence grounded her in a way she did not expect. He did not step forward to claim authority, nor did he attempt to guide her hand. He merely existed alongside her, steady, alert, his aura both protective and recognizing. His gaze lingered on her with a quiet intensity that spoke volumes. He saw her, truly saw her, not as a dangerous flame to be feared, but as a being capable of shaping the destiny that had long shadowed their world. The subtle warmth of that recognition made her chest tighten and her heart ache with longing she had not allowed herself to feel in years. A sudden shimmer along the stones drew her attention, a flicker of silver light tracing the edges of ancient glyphs, pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat she could feel in her chest. She crouched slightly, nose twitching, senses reaching, tracing every pulse of energy as it wove through the ruins. Every fiber of her being hummed with the knowledge that these stones, this shrine, had been waiting for her, that it had called her across miles, across years of fear and exile, to this precise moment. The whispers grew louder, layering into a cadence she felt more than heard. Child of flame. Child of blood. The path is yours, but only if you claim it. Each syllable resonated deep in her core, striking fear and awe in equal measure. She swallowed hard, muscles coiled, every nerve alert to the possibility that the prophecy might demand more than she could give. And yet, impossibly, there was exhilaration in the fear, a sense of rightness she had never experienced before, the echo of her true power, of the destiny that had been quietly humming beneath the surface of her life since the first spark of silver fire had coursed through her veins. Cale stepped closer, silent but perceptible, his presence a tether between reality and legend. You feel it, don't you? He whispered, voice low, wary, edged with curiosity. This calling. It's yours. You're the one they speak of. Alara's ears flicked back, tension coiling in her body. Her claws pressed into the mossed stone beneath her paws, as if grounding herself against a tidal wave of destiny threatening to sweep her away. She began, voice trembling, faltering, nearly lost in the roar of doubt that had always followed her. I can't. How could it be me? Cale's gaze did not waver. Amber eyes held hers with unwavering intensity, not pressuring, not demanding, but presenting a challenge she could not ignore. Because it is, he said simply, and there was no doubt in his tone. Because the world has been waiting for someone like you. And because you are not as alone as you think. The words struck her like fire. Not alone. She exhaled slowly, tasting the frost-laden air, the metallic tang of energy that clung to the shrine, the faint echo of centuries-old power thrumming through the stone beneath her paws. She wanted to retreat, to run, to vanish into the forest shadows she had called home for so long. And yet, every instinct in her body, the flame in her veins, the pull of the prophecy, the silent, unwavering presence of Cale, urged her forward. A shiver ran through the shrine, subtle at first, then stronger, as if the forest itself acknowledged her hesitance and demanded affirmation. Light flickered across the moss and carved glyphs, shadows dancing as though alive, stretching, reaching, waiting. Alara pressed her paw to a glyph that glimmered faintly under the silver light, and the pulse beneath her claw sang through her veins. She felt the history of the shrine, the weight of those who had come before, the unbroken line of prophecy that led to her, and the responsibility pressed upon her chest, suffocating and exhilarating in equal measure. Her internal conflict roiled. I am too small. I am too alone. I am not enough. The thoughts threatened to overwhelm her, claw at her confidence, snuff out the faint spark of hope Cale had stirred in her. Yet she could not ignore it. The resonance of her flame, the way the shrine seemed to bend subtly toward her, the faint hum of energy that vibrated in tune with her heartbeat. She could feel the gravity of what was to come. She could feel the pull of destiny demanding her attention, demanding her courage. Cale stepped closer still, silent, steady, a sentinel of understanding. He did not push, did not prod, did not try to force her hand. He simply existed, a constant in the midst of ancient, trembling power, a reminder that she did not have to bear it alone. And in that presence, Alara allowed herself to breathe, to feel, to acknowledge the stirring of a truth she had spent a lifetime hiding from. She was not merely a survivor. She was the beginning of something far larger than herself. The moonlight dimmed, and the shrine pulsed with faint silver energy, sending threads of light snaking across the ground, brushing against Alara's paws and Kale's form. The whispers returned, carrying names she did not know, prophecies she had never heard, a song of power and responsibility intertwined. Child of flame. Child of blood. Rise, for the world awaits. And in that moment, standing on the threshold of destiny, feeling the pulse of ancient energy in her veins, hearing the silent, steady heartbeat of Kale beside her, Alara understood, she was not the girl they had cast out. She was not the dangerous, lonely wolf. She was something more. Something vast. Something destined. The air shifted abruptly, heavy with the scent of blood and iron, carrying with it a foreboding that made the hair along Alara's spine stand on end. The shrine, once a sanctuary bathed in moonlight and silver glow, now seemed fragile, vulnerable to the darkness that crept from the forest edges like smoke curling toward a candle flame. Her paws pressed against the frozen soil, claws unsheathing instinctively as her senses screamed of movement, of predators, of eyes that watched from shadows deeper than night itself. Kale's stance tightened beside her, every muscle coiled like a drawn bow. His amber gaze swept the perimeter of the shrine, sharp, calculating, but beneath the practiced control there was a storm, a tempest of conflicting duties and instincts. The forest seemed to echo his tension, the whispering trees swaying in uneasy rhythm, carrying a faint, unnatural growl from beyond the tree-line. The distant rumble of claws striking stone and earth sent tremors through her chest, the first prelude to an oncoming storm of violence. They came suddenly, not with the ceremony of warning, but with the feral precision of predators who had tasted dominance before. From the shadows emerged the rival alpha pack, their coats bristling, eyes gleaming with contempt and fear, fangs bared in challenge. Behind them, the shadow beasts slithered through mist and moonlight, creatures of darkness, wiry, sinewy, with eyes that glowed a dim crimson and claws that promised death. Their arrival was a calculated terror, meant to unseat, to dominate, to remind all who dared to defy the established order of who truly held power. Alara's heart hammered in her chest. She felt exposed, yet defiant. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet something deeper urged her to stand her ground, to embrace the flame within her, even if it could burn her alive. Her silver eyes flickered, catching Kale's form beside her, and in that glance, a surge of courage intertwined with fear. He was not just her protector, he was the anchor in the storm, the one tethering her to something solid amidst chaos. And yet, she saw the strain in his expression, the silent battle between loyalty to his pack and the raw, unyielding need to protect her. The lead alpha of the rival pack stepped forward, a hulking shadow cloaked in arrogance and menace. His voice rolled through the shrine like thunder, echoing off stone and bone. The girl with the flame. She is a danger to all of us, he snarled. You think prophecy absolves you? You are a threat, and you will be dealt with. His words carried the weight of centuries-old tradition, a force meant to cow, to intimidate, to fracture the fragile resolve of those who dared to challenge him. Kale growled low in his throat, his body a taut line of controlled fury. She is under my protection, he said, voice even, lethal in its calm. And no threat will touch her while I draw breath. His stance was both challenge and shield, a promise that he would not flinch, yet his eyes flickered with doubt, the knowledge that defying the rival alpha could cost him everything, from pack alliances to his very life. The clash began with the raw brutality of instinct. Shadow beasts lunged from the tree-line, moving like liquid night, teeth snapping and claws tearing at earth and air. Alara shifted instinctively, her form fluid, silver sparks flickering along her fur as her senses stretched to the maximum. She ducked, leapt, countered with precise strikes, and even as adrenaline surged, a storm of fear pressed against her chest. She was not invincible, not yet, she was still learning to wield the flame that had defined her exile. But defiance burned brighter than fear in her eyes. Kale moved like a tempest beside her, the embodiment of lethal precision. His blows struck with controlled force, yet each movement betrayed the strain of dual loyalties, the protective fury toward her, and the fear of fracturing his own pack by association with a girl so feared and so dangerous. Every strike, every dodge, every growl that tore from his throat carried unspoken weight. He could not fail. Not now. Not when she had finally allowed herself to hope. The rival alpha's challenge was not solely physical. Words cut as sharply as claws, accusations hurled in a chorus meant to unbalance and intimidate. "You consort with the girl of prophecy," they spat. "You would betray your people for a lone wolf whose fire will consume all." Each syllable struck Cale's face, and yet he did not yield. His jaw tightened, amber eyes flashing with unspoken fury, even as his hands hovered near Alara's shoulders, ready to shield, to pull, to anchor her through the storm. Alara felt the tension coil inside her like a spring ready to snap. She was vulnerable, exposed not just to the enemies at their perimeter, but to the raw truth of her own inadequacy, the years of exile, the doubt that had followed her since birth, the knowledge that even Cale might not be able to save her if the tide turned. And yet, in the corner of her awareness, she felt a flicker, a pulse of the flame that had been her curse and her secret weapon. She would not cower. She would not vanish. She would fight, and if she fell, she would fall defiant. Shadow beasts swarmed, teeth sinking into ice-crusted earth and fur, claws raking against Cale's defenses and hers alike. The rhythm of combat was savage, primal, a symphony of growls, snarls, and the flash of silver against the darkness. Every strike demanded precision, every breath a calculation, and every glance between them, Cale and Alara, was a silent dialogue of trust, of warning, of connection deeper than words. Their bodies moved in near-perfect harmony, instinctively shielding each other, reacting to threats before they fully formed, the fire of mutual reliance burning brighter than the shadows around them. The rival alpha's claws grazed Cale's arm, drawing a hiss of pain and fury, and in that instant, Alara surged forward, silver flame flaring, teeth bared, a primal roar echoing through the shrine. She struck, claws raking across the pack alpha's flank, sparks of energy flicking like lightning from the tips of her fur. The creatures faltered, momentarily unnerved by the combination of raw power and unyielding defiance. And in that hesitation, Cale pressed the advantage, driving forward with lethal precision, his growls harmonizing with hers in a symphony of resistance and warning. But the assault was relentless. More shadow beasts emerged from the tree-line, more voices rose with accusations and threats, and the shrine seemed to shudder under the weight of impending chaos. Cale's jaw tightened as he assessed the imbalance. He could not protect her indefinitely. His instinct screamed that retreat might be the only chance to survive, to fight another day, to reclaim the advantage that brute strength alone could not secure. Alara's chest heaved with exertion and adrenaline, eyes locked on him, reading the flicker of doubt, the silent acknowledgement of impossible choices. "Go," he growled low, teeth bared, but his eyes, amber, fierce, haunted, spoke volumes. "Survive. Train. Return. Together we will rise." Her defiance flared, muscles coiled, tail swishing with tension. She wanted to argue, to refuse, to stand until the last shadow beast fell and the last word of accusation was silenced. And yet, even as she stood poised to challenge fate, instinct and survival whispered the truth: she could not win this battle alone. Not yet. Cale shifted, a blur of movement, and with one last glance, a promise etched in fire and amber, he drove her toward the misted tree-line. The rival alpha's roar filled the shrine, echoing with venom and fury, yet Cale remained, a wall of resistance, anchoring the chaos, absorbing blows that might have shattered lesser bodies. And in that fleeting separation, Alara's silver flame surged in defiance, a whisper of power and promise she would carry forward, a vow unspoken but unbroken: she would return, stronger, fiercer, and ready to claim the destiny that had been thrust upon her. The forest swallowed her retreat, mist curling around her form, yet the tension lingered like an unhealed wound. Cale remained, a solitary figure of strength, fury, and unyielding loyalty, the amber of his eyes a memory that would anchor her resolve through the long night ahead. And in that separation, in the echo of growls and the fading shimmer of silver flame, the first threads of prophecy had been tested, and the first vow of defiance had been made. The night pressed close around them, thick with mist and the scent of pine, earth, and frost. They had retreated into a shallow cave, hidden from prying eyes, the firelight flickering across jagged rocks, casting shadows that danced like silent witnesses to their survival. The silver moon, full and luminous, spilled over the entrance, brushing Cale's features in spectral light. His amber eyes were softer now, weighed with the tension of battles fought and the unspoken burdens he carried, yet they remained sharp, alert, alive with a restrained storm. Elias sat across from him, paws folded close, fur glinting faintly with the silver sparks that marked her bloodline. Her chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, each inhale carrying the bitter taste of adrenaline and the thrill of surviving a battle that should have broken her. Her mind swirled with the chaos of the night, the attacks, the accusations, the venom of rival packs. And yet here, in this fragile pocket of stillness, she felt a pulse of something she had not allowed herself to feel in years: trust. The fire crackled, a soft rhythm to match the thrum of her heartbeat. Cale shifted, settling closer without breaking the space of safety between them, his gaze steady, probing, patient. "I should have protected you better," he murmured, voice low, almost a whisper. The words carried weight beyond their surface. They were confession, guilt, and longing woven together. His jaw tightened, eyes flickering to the shadows that licked the cave walls, as though he feared the world might seep inside and claim them both before the first words could land. Alara's ears flattened slightly, instinct responding to the raw vulnerability in his tone. She wanted to speak, to reassure, to say that she had survived because of him, because of the tether he had thrown across the chaos and anchored her to life. But words felt fragile, inadequate to the intensity that wrapped around them. Instead, she met his gaze, amber meeting silver, her eyes shining with a mixture of awe, fear, and the fragile thread of hope she had allowed to flicker tonight. Cale exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing fractionally. "I've lost," he began, voice thick with emotion, "someone I thought I would protect forever. And I promised I would never fail again." The words fell heavy between them, revealing cracks in the armor he had carried for years. For the first time, Alara glimpsed the weight he bore, not merely as an alpha, but as a soul scarred by loss, by the consequences of power, by the loneliness of command. Her silver flame flickered faintly, warmth brushing across her paws, a subtle resonance with the truth he offered. "I know what it is to be cast aside," she said softly, her voice trembling with the memory she had held close for too long. "To be feared, to be hunted by the ones who should have loved you. To carry a power that others think will destroy them, even if it only protects you." Her eyes dropped to her paws, claws brushing the firelight, tracing faint arcs of silver energy that danced and shimmered with life. Cale leaned closer, closer than he had before, and the space between them became charged with a tension neither could deny. He did not move aggressively, he did not seek possession. Instead, he existed in the space with her, a counterpoint to the fear and isolation that had defined her life. "Your power," he murmured, "it doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you extraordinary. And I see it. All of it. Even the parts you think are too much." Her breath caught. The words struck a chord deep within her, tugging at the fragile armor she had built over years of rejection and exile. For decades, she had carried shame as a cloak, believing the silver flame to be a curse rather than a gift. Yet here was Cale, amber eyes unwavering, holding her gaze with something unspoken but palpable: acceptance. Recognition. Understanding. The cave felt smaller suddenly, as if the fire and the moonlight and the space between them had shrunk to contain only the two of them, leaving the world's dangers at the edges, suspended. Every instinct she had sharpened through years of survival whispered caution, yet every nerve in her body demanded connection. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, but the scars of exile ran deep, threading fear into even the tenderest moments. Cale's hand hovered near hers, fingers brushing, almost imperceptibly, but enough to ignite a warmth that spread through her chest. His presence was a tether, a proof that she could stand still without crumbling, that someone could see her for what she truly was, and not recoil. The firelight reflected in his eyes, amber dancing with gold and shadow, and she felt herself caught in the gravity of his gaze, teetering on the edge between fear and longing, caution and surrender. I've made mistakes, Kale whispered, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate with unspoken history. I've trusted wrong people, let the wrong wolves into my life, and lost. But with you, I feel, he trailed off, eyes narrowing slightly, searching hers for permission, for acknowledgement, for a bridge across the distance carved by years of pain. I feel that I can try again. That I can. Alara leaned forward without thinking, compelled by the honesty in his voice, the vulnerability he dared to show. Try, she breathed, voice soft, uncertain, yet tinged with hope. Do you? Do you ever fear that I'll fail you? That my fire will consume everything around me? Kale's amber eyes softened further, flecked with sorrow and something dangerous, something longing. I won't lie, he said quietly, I fear. I always will. Fear is part of survival, part of leadership. But fear doesn't mean I step back. Fear doesn't mean I turn away. Not from you. His hand brushed hers deliberately this time, fingertips grazing against fur and skin in a tentative, electric touch. Every nerve in her body thrummed in response, silver flame dancing in resonance with the spark he had ignited. The cave fell silent save for the crackle of the fire, the distant calls of nocturnal hunters, and the rhythm of their breaths, intermingling, synchronized in a dance older than time. Alara swallowed, heart hammering, and allowed herself, for the first time in what felt like forever, to feel something beyond survival. Trust. Connection. Desire. She met his gaze steadily, unflinching, and for a moment, the world fell away, the rival packs, the shadow beasts, the looming prophecy. There was only the warmth of firelight, the pulse of magic, the tether between two fractured souls daring to reach for each other. Kale's eyes drifted to her lips, hesitation tempered by restraint. His voice, low and raw, carried the weight of unspoken promises. If we survive this, if we come out of the storm together, will you let me see all of you? Not just the fire, not just the fight, but the girl behind the flame? Alara's breath hitched. The question was a dagger and a bomb at once. Vulnerability, hope, longing, they surged through her veins. Her silver flame pulsed softly in acknowledgement, the inner rhythm echoing her racing heartbeat. She leaned slightly closer, feeling the magnetic pull between them, the tension tightening like a drawn bow, a moment suspended on the cusp of inevitability. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Mist curled at the cave entrance, firelight flickered across jagged stone, and the distant moon cast its gaze upon them like an approving witness. Kale's hand inched closer, fingers brushing hers in deliberate hesitation, their proximity a silent conversation of trust, yearning, and promise. The heat of his presence, tempered by the cool night, made her fur tingle, her chest ache, and her pulse flare with emotion she had spent years suppressing. And just as their lips hovered inches apart, as the firelight cast dancing shadows that seemed to lean toward them, the distant echo of claws against stone, the faint growl of shadow beasts lurking at the forest's edge, reminded them that the world beyond their fragile sanctuary had not paused. Survival, destiny, and the prophecy waited. The moment, delicate as it was, stretched taut with unspoken tension, a promise that connection could not be denied, yet the storm beyond demanded readiness, resilience, and the courage to face what came next. Alara's silver eyes met Kale's amber gaze, and in that exchange, words became unnecessary. Trust. Hope. Longing. Fire and flame intertwined in silent acknowledgement, a fragile tether that would carry them through the nights ahead, through the battles yet to come, through the storm that awaited both their hearts and their lives. The night deepened, and the fire flickered low, casting their forms in silhouette against the cave walls. They remained close, breaths synchronized, hearts tethered, the tension between them coiling like a spring ready to uncoil, but not yet. For now, it was enough. Enough to feel, enough to hope, enough to prepare for the inevitable storm that would test not just their survival, but the fragile, burgeoning connection between two souls scarred yet unbroken. The shrine, once a place of sacred stillness, now trembled under the weight of accusation. Shadows stretched long, curling across jagged stone as torchlight flickered against carved symbols, illuminating the faces of the council, their eyes narrow, lips twisted in fear, suspicion, and unmasked contempt. Alara stood at the center, fur bristling, silver flame faintly flickering along her forelegs, her heart hammering like a drumbeat of war. The words they spoke cut sharper than any fang or claw, slicing into the fragile hope she had nurtured in Kale's presence. "She is not just a lone wolf," one elder hissed, voice carrying over the hushed murmurs of the gathered pack. "She carries the bloodline of the Alpha Kings, the power of the silver flame. She is a threat, an aberration. If left unchecked, she will burn everything we hold sacred to ash." Each syllable struck Alara like a blade, the venom in their tone designed not merely to warn but to destroy, to fracture her from within. Alara's ears flattened, instinct screaming in protest. She opened her mouth, ready to speak, to defend herself, but words faltered, trembling under the sheer weight of betrayal. She had trusted them once, or thought she had, and now the mask was gone. Their loyalty, their feigned support, crumbled into contemptuous accusation. She had been a pawn in their fear, an object lesson in what happens when power is misunderstood, and the sting of betrayal burned hotter than any enemy's fang. Kale stepped beside her, muscles taut, jaw clenched, eyes flashing with the storm that raged within him. Yet even his presence, steady as it was, carried conflict. The council's gaze bore into him, expectant, commanding, reminding him of his duties, his loyalties. Stand by your pack, or stand by her. The dichotomy tore at him, a blade twisting in a wound old and deep. He had chosen to protect her once in the forest, risking his own authority and alliances. Could he do so again? Could he defy centuries of tradition, the delicate balance of power, for the girl whose fire mirrored his own? Alara sensed his tension, felt it coil like a living thing against her own body. The unspoken question hung between them, heavier than the shadows, darker than the whispering stones. Will he abandon me? Or will he stand? Every beat of her heart, every pulse of her silver flame, was a drumbeat of fury, hurt, and defiance. Then it came, a voice she had trusted, familiar, calm, and betraying. "Alara," it whispered, venom wrapped in honey, "you should have listened. You should have remained in the shadows where you belong." The words sliced across her chest. The speaker's eyes, soft and familiar, met hers briefly before they turned away, indifferent to the devastation they had sown. Trust shattered in a heartbeat. The bond she had believed in, fragile yet precious, crumbled beneath the weight of betrayal. Her paws shook, claws digging into the stone beneath her, leaving faint gouges that smoked faintly in the cold air. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, silver flame flickering violently along her forelegs, her tail bristling, ears flat against her skull. Rage, grief, and fear collided in a tempest, and she felt it building within her, a force she had kept chained for years, restrained by doubt, isolation, and the fear of harming those around her. The council did not see the girl they had cast out. They saw a weapon, a threat to their fragile order. But Kale, he saw everything. His gaze locked on hers, amber eyes wide, reflecting both fear and awe. He had never seen her like this. Not truly. Not the fire unleashed when control slipped, when fury and pain fused into something raw, primal, and undeniable. "Stop." Kale growled, voice a whip of warning, yet even his authority seemed fragile against the momentum of the council's condemnation. His body moved, coiled, ready to intercept any physical blow, but he could not hold her pain, her fury, within his hands. That was hers alone to wield. And she did not flinch. Alara inhaled sharply, lungs filling with cold, night air, and exhaled a roar that shook the stone walls, a sound that carried centuries of oppression, rejection, and solitude. Silver flame erupted along her fur, licking at her paws, her muzzle, her tail, illuminating the chamber with harsh, unrelenting brilliance. Her eyes glowed, and in that light, she looked every bit the legend whispered in frightened tones. The child of the Alpha bloodline, the girl with the silver flame, the threat that none dared confront. The council staggered, some shielding their eyes, some faltering under the raw display of power. The ground beneath her paws trembled faintly, echoing the heartbeat of the fire that had taken hold in her chest. The betrayal, the words, the accusations, the indifference of the one she had trusted, had unlocked something she could no longer contain. Her fury was a force of nature, a storm incarnate, and it demanded recognition. Cale stepped closer, hand outstretched, not to restrain, but to anchor. "Alara," he murmured, voice low, steady, "breathe. Feel it, yes, but do not let it consume you completely. Control it enough to survive, to strike when necessary. You are stronger than their fear. Stronger than their lies." Her silver eyes met his amber gaze, and in that exchange, trust rekindled in a fragile, trembling ember. She saw the weight he carried, his loyalty, his fear, his acknowledgement of her power, and for the first time in years, she felt seen, fully, entirely. Not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as a person whose fire could illuminate or destroy. And in that recognition, fury and grief merged into clarity, sharpening her focus like the edge of a blade. The council's voices rose again, trembling under her silent challenge. "She will burn everything if left unchecked," they cried. "She cannot be allowed to stand among us." But their words were met with a sudden, palpable shift. Cale moved, positioning himself at her side, body a living shield, growl rumbling low in his throat. The tension in his muscles mirrored hers, the defiance, the readiness, the unspoken promise that she would not face this alone. The air thickened with anticipation. Shadows seemed to twist unnaturally, drawn toward the pulse of Alara's power. The silver flame surged, uncontrolled, coiling and snapping like lightning across her fur, illuminating the chamber with harsh brilliance. The ground trembled faintly, dust falling from the ceiling as the magic of her lineage made itself known. The council faltered again, some retreating, others frozen in disbelief. For once, they did not dictate the moment, she did. Alara's ears flicked back, gaze sharp, jaw set. "I am not your weapon," she growled, voice low and resonant, echoing through the chamber like rolling thunder. "I am not your pawn. I am not your sacrifice. I am me, and I will not bow to your fear." The words struck like fire, shattering centuries of imposed hierarchy and fear. The room seemed to tremble, echoing with the power that had long been buried within her, the fury born of betrayal, and the recognition of her own strength. Cale's hand brushed hers briefly, grounding her even as the fire within her demanded release. Together, they were a storm, a force that no council, no pack, no shadow beast could ignore. For the first time, the betrayal crystallized into purpose. Rage was no longer aimless, it was a spark, a call to rise, to reclaim, to transform. Every ounce of hurt, every moment of exile, every word of condemnation became fuel for her power. She would not break. She would not hide. And she would make them see that the girl they had scorned was no mere threat, she was destiny incarnate, a force of fire and blood that would shape the world whether they feared it or not. Cale's amber eyes met hers once more, steady, unwavering, a promise in the chaos. "Together," he whispered. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Alara's silver flame pulsed in response, a heartbeat of fury, hope, and unyielding resolve. The mask had dropped. The world had seen her truth. And from this devastation, the first thread of transformation began to weave itself through the night, binding fury and power into something unstoppable. The night hung heavy over the shrine, the aftermath of fury and fire settling into a fragile, trembling calm. Smoke curled like silver fingers from smoldering stones, carrying with it the scent of burned earth and the acrid tang of shadow beasts fleeing into the darkness. The moon, now a pale witness, cast an ethereal glow across the ruins, illuminating the aftermath of what had been wrought by one girl's fury, one alpha's loyalty, and the undeniable power of a bloodline long silenced. Alara stood at the center, body tense, fur still crackling with residual sparks of silver flame, eyes shimmering with the raw light of a storm barely restrained. Her chest heaved, breaths ragged yet deliberate, a rhythm that mirrored the pulse of the earth itself, still trembling from the force of her declaration. She had claimed her power. She had struck fear into those who had doubted her, shattered the walls of betrayal, and yet, a new uncertainty tugged at the edges of her resolve. Around her, the shrine was littered with the remnants of confrontation, scorched stones, broken altars, and the occasional shadowed silhouette of fleeing enemies. The council had dispersed, some retreating in fear, others plotting silently in corners where darkness could mask their intentions. The rival Alpha Pack, humiliated and terrified, had vanished into the night, leaving only the echoes of their disbelief behind. And Kale stood beside her, amber eyes soft with awe, pride, and a protective flame that mirrored her own. He had witnessed her claim, yet even his steadfast presence could not soothe the gnawing question that lingered in her mind. Was she truly free? The question was silent, yet deafening, reverberating in the spaces between flickering firelight and moonshadow. Every instinct told her to remain vigilant, to anticipate another attack, another betrayal, another test. The silver flame, once a secret she had buried beneath layers of fear and exile, now roared with a life of its own, pulsing in tandem with her heartbeat. It whispered of power, of destiny, of responsibilities she had not yet fully understood. And in the midst of triumph, a chilling doubt settled: would the world ever accept her? Or would they forever fear the girl who dared to rise? Kale's voice broke through the silence, low and steady, a lifeline amidst uncertainty. "Alara," he murmured, stepping closer, claws brushing lightly against the stones as he approached, "you've claimed what is yours. You've shown them all what happens when the fire is awakened. But, what now? What will you do with it?" His amber eyes, golden in the firelight, held more than curiosity, they held faith, challenge, and the unspoken plea for her to trust not only in her power but in him. Alara's ears flicked back slightly, tension coiling in her shoulders, tail lashing in silent frustration. "I don't know," she admitted, voice low, trembling, carrying the weight of responsibility she had long avoided. I fought, I claimed, but the world, the prophecy, what if it's never enough? What if they still see me as a threat? What if," her words faltered, choked by the magnitude of her own power and the memories of betrayal that had forged her. Kale reached out, hand brushing hers, not to restrain, but to anchor, to tether her to something solid in the chaos. "Then we face it," he said, voice firm yet gentle, a contrast to the storm that still flickered along her silver flame. "Together. Whatever comes, whoever stands in your way, we face it. You are not alone." Her silver eyes met his amber ones, a silent exchange that spoke volumes. Trust. Vulnerability. Hope. And, perhaps most dangerous of all, longing. Every beat of her heart echoed the rhythm of the fire still pulsing along her limbs, a cadence that was both warning and promise. "This is only the beginning," the flame whispered. "The world has not seen the last of what I am." Beyond the shrine, the night seemed to hold its breath, the forest hushed, leaves still, shadows taut with anticipation. Somewhere in the distance, the echoes of fleeing enemies stirred faintly, reminders that the dangers she had faced tonight were not vanquished, merely repelled. Yet even in the quiet, the tension lingered, like the first tremor before another storm, another challenge, another trial of the fire that now lived fully within her. Alara's gaze drifted over the ruins, past scorched stones and twisted shadows, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the enormity of what had been achieved. Her fury had been a weapon. Her fire, a declaration. Her power undeniable and true. And yet, lurking beneath the triumph, a deeper question gnawed at her soul, a question not of strength, but of choice, of alignment, of belonging. Who will stand with me? Who will fear me? Who will see me for what I truly am and not what they wish me to be? The whisper of prophecy, long dormant, stirred in her mind. Visions of ancestors, of kings and queens of wolf bloodlines, flickered across her consciousness. Their voices, faint yet insistent, urged caution, vigilance, but also courage. The fire is yours. The choice is yours. Choose wisely, for the world will watch, and it will judge. Kale's hand tightened over hers, grounding her, pulling her from the spiral of doubt. "The choice," he said softly, "is not theirs to make anymore. It's yours. Will you rise fully, or will you bow to their fear?" His words were both challenge and invitation, a mirror to the inner tumult that roared through her like wildfire. Alara inhaled deeply, silver flame flaring along her limbs in response to the surge of emotion, heat, and determination coursing through her. She could feel the power flowing, raw and unfiltered, urging her toward action, toward assertion, toward destiny. And in that instant, the question crystallized, not for the council, not for the shadow beasts, not even for Kale. But for every soul who would witness what came next, would they stand with her, or against her? The night seemed to hold its breath, the forest suspended in anticipation. The ruins pulsed faintly with light, responding to her power, as if recognizing the birth of a sovereign who would reshape the world. Sparks flickered across stone, across moss, across her fur, as though the earth itself bore witness to the choices that had been forged in fire and blood. And then, softly, almost reverently, she whispered to the night, "Would you choose her, or fear the fire she carries?" The words hung, a challenge and an invitation, echoing across the ruins, seeping into the shadows, drifting through the trees and across the sleeping forest. Every heartbeat, every breath, carried the weight of destiny, the tremor of potential, the inevitability of transformation. Kale's amber eyes met hers, steady, unwavering, a silent promise that whatever the answer, whatever the consequence, they would face it together. And for the first time, the fire within her shifted, not from anger, not from revenge, not from betrayal, but from something deeper, more profound, purpose. Sovereignty. Choice. As the embers of battle cooled, the faint glow of silver flame lingered, pulsing like a heartbeat through the night. The shadows stretched long, bending to the light, twisting in question and anticipation, awaiting the response of a world that had not yet seen the full measure of what she was. And as the moon climbed higher, pale and watchful, her voice carried once more, soft yet insistent, a whisper to every soul listening, mortal and immortal alike. If her story burned something inside you, subscribe to Moonlight Mate Stories. Here, every tale ignites your soul. The wind shifted, rustling leaves like distant applause. Somewhere beyond the ruins, a shadow paused, a tremor of recognition passing through the night. The question remained, hovering like a specter, will you choose her, or fear the fire she carries? And in that suspended moment, the world waited, holding its breath, as Alara's silver flame pulsed, steady, unwavering, a light in the darkness, a promise of power, love, and destiny yet to come. The ruins lay silent beneath the fading glow of Alara's silver flame, the fire now reduced to gentle, flickering embers that cast shadows stretching long across broken stones. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint scent of scorched earth, pine, and the lingering power of what had transpired. Smoke swirled lazily around their feet as Alara and Kale walked side by side, bodies weary but still brimming with quiet, latent power. Every step they took pressed against the stones, a reminder that the ground had felt the tremors of her anger, her triumph, and her awakening, and it had remembered. Moonlight draped over them in thin, silver threads, casting elongated, wavering shadows that clung to their forms like ghosts of battles past. The night was unnaturally still, as if the forest itself held its breath, reluctant to disturb the fragile calm that had followed the storm of fire and fury. Yet beneath the calm lay tension, an undercurrent of electricity that pressed against the skin and whispered of dangers not yet faced. Somewhere, deep beneath the roots of the mountains and forest, a pulse thrummed, echoing the rhythm of power, ancient, relentless, waiting. Alara's pause carried her forward, heavy but determined, her muscles still coiled from exertion, her silver eyes scanning the shadows for signs of lingering threats. Her chest rose and fell steadily, yet inside, her mind spun with unquiet thoughts. She had faced betrayal, unleashed her fury, claimed her power, and yet the sense of unfinished business gnawed at her. The shadows she had faced tonight were only fragments of what awaited beyond the night, beyond the ruins, beyond the fragile truce with her own destiny. Kale's presence beside her was a tether, solid and unwavering. He moved with the ease of a predator accustomed to power and danger, yet his eyes betrayed a hint of awe, a reflection of the fire she had unleashed. His hand brushed against hers occasionally, not to restrain, but to remind her of solidarity, of partnership, of the unspoken vow that had crystallized between them in the chaos of the ritual site. Each glance carried questions and promises, a conversation of trust and longing that words could not capture. The forest around them seemed to respond to their passage. Leaves rustled in subtle, almost deliberate cadence. Shadows shifted and lengthened, curling like fingers reaching toward them, yet recoiling at the faint shimmer of lingering silver flame. The ground trembled faintly beneath their feet, subtle but persistent, as though the earth itself were a living witness to the events that had transpired. With each step, the tremor grew imperceptibly stronger, a heartbeat of power and warning that neither Alara nor Kale could ignore. Alara's thoughts were not entirely on the present. Her mind reached back to the council, to the betrayal that had torn her trust apart, to the shadowed whispers that had sought to crush her before she could claim her strength. She remembered the faces, the fear, the awe, the thin veneer of authority breaking beneath the weight of her power. And she remembered Kale, steadfast, unwavering, a constant in the storm of her awakening. In her heart, a single, quiet resolve took root: I am not done. I will not rest. The fire I carry will shape more than the ruins behind me. As they walked further from the shrine, the moon dipped behind a veil of clouds, dimming the silver light that had illuminated their path. The forest grew darker, heavier, almost suffocating, the shadows pressing closer. Each rustle of leaf or snap of twig sent a jolt of alert through Alara, her senses stretched to their fullest, her silver flame sparking faintly in response to the tension that hummed in the air. She had tasted her own power tonight, she had felt its force ripple through the stones, through the earth, through the air. And she knew, with the certainty of instinct and prophecy, that the night's trials were merely the beginning. Kale's voice broke the oppressive silence, low, reverent, and carrying an edge of concern. Do you feel it? He asked, eyes scanning the forest edges, muscles coiled like a panther ready to strike. The tremors, the energy lingering in the earth? Something else watches. Something, waiting. Alara's silver eyes narrowed, reflecting the dim moonlight, pupils dilated with heightened awareness. She could feel it too. A pulse deep beneath the ground, a resonance that thrummed like the echo of a distant drumbeat. It was not a beast, not a rival alpha, not a council plotting in the shadows. This was something older, something ancient, something that had waited through centuries of silence for the rise of the silver flame. Her fur bristled involuntarily, and the flame along her limbs pulsed faintly, a heartbeat of power responding to the invisible call of destiny. The true alpha. She whispered, voice low, almost lost in the night wind, they're not done. None of this was the end. It's only the beginning. Her words carried weight, both warning and acknowledgement, an echo of prophecy she had only begun to understand. Every instinct, every flicker of power in her veins, told her that the forces she had faced tonight were merely pawns in a much larger game. There were others like her, others marked by destiny, others who had been hidden, watched, perhaps groomed for the eventual rise of power that could rival hers. Kale's hand found hers again, stronger this time, intertwining with hers in a silent vow of unity, trust, and shared fate. Whatever comes, he said, voice low and firm, carrying the gravity of someone who had stood beside fire and chaos and survived, we face it together. But I fear what else is out there. And I fear that they know more than we do. Alara tightened her grip on his hand, her silver flame responding subtly, warmth coiling along her limbs, grounding her, empowering her. Let them watch, she said softly, almost a whisper, yet imbued with certainty and quiet menace. Let them wait. Whatever is coming, they will not see it coming in time. I am ready. And I will not be alone. As they continued walking, the forest around them grew thicker, shadows merging with mist, the moonlight struggling through layers of fog. The tremors beneath their feet grew stronger, faint echoes of distant power that hinted at forces gathering beyond the horizon. And then, a voice, soft, chilling, carried on the wind. It was not fully human, not fully wolf, a resonance that vibrated in bones and blood alike. A whisper that froze the blood in Alara's veins and sent a shiver through Kale's spine. She is not the only one. The words hung in the night like a prophecy, heavy and unyielding, echoing in the hollow spaces between the trees, lingering in the shadows where light dared not reach. Aria froze, silver flame flickering along her limbs as the tremor beneath her feet intensified. Kale's amber eyes widened, a mix of awe and dread reflecting the same pulse of fear and curiosity that roared in her own chest. The voice faded as quickly as it came, leaving behind only a resonant chill, a haunting promise, and the knowledge that the world held secrets yet unveiled. Alara's gaze swept the forest edges, ears flicking at every sound, every rustle, every distant howl. She could feel the pulse of others, hidden yet watching, waiting, resonating with the same ancient energy that now coursed fully through her veins. Her mind whirled with questions, doubts, and the thrill of what was to come. Not the only one. The prophecy was unfolding. The rise of power she had begun tonight was merely the opening move in a game that spanned generations. Kale tightened his grip, grounding her once more as her silver eyes shimmered with a mixture of anticipation, wariness, and resolve. "Whatever this is," he murmured, voice low but steady, "we will face it. Together. Always." Aria inhaled, silver flame pulsing faintly in response to the promise she made, to herself, to Kale, and to the legacy that now demanded her full allegiance. "Then let them come," she whispered, voice carrying the weight of inevitability, fury, and destiny entwined. "Let them see the fire of the Alpha. Let them know it cannot be denied. And let them know, this isn't over." The wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and earth, the faint echo of distant howls, the unmistakable pulse of power awakening elsewhere. Shadows stirred, leaves rustled, and the tremor beneath their feet was no longer subtle. It had become a rhythm, a heartbeat of something greater, something ancient, something that had waited centuries for this moment. Alara's silver flame flickered higher, responding to the resonance, coiling along her limbs, illuminating the path ahead with ghostly brilliance. Kale's presence remained her anchor, yet even he could not quiet the thrill, the fear, the anticipation that pulsed through her. Together, they walked into the thickening mist, their silhouettes merging with the night, their footsteps echoing through the ruins, carrying the promise of power, love, and a destiny yet unclaimed. And in the shadowed forest, a faint whisper lingered, almost a breath, almost a warning, fading into the night air. "The true Alpha hasn't risen, yet." The words dissolved into the wind, leaving only tension, anticipation, and the unshakable certainty that the story, the prophecy, the fire, and the destiny of Aria, and all who would follow her, was far from over. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the horizon, spilling gold and silver across the ruins of the shrine. The air was still heavy with the echoes of fire, battle, and power, yet in that silence, a new calm settled, a fragile, beautiful calm that carried the promise of beginnings. Aria stood atop the shattered altar, her silver flame now subdued, a gentle shimmer dancing along her fur like morning dew on steel. She breathed deeply, letting the warmth of the rising sun mingle with the lingering heat of her own power. Kale stepped beside her, silent, steady, amber eyes softened by awe and something deeper, pride, affection, devotion. His hand brushed hers, and in that touch, Aria felt the anchor she had longed for through years of exile, betrayal, and fear. He did not seek to control her. He did not demand her obedience. He simply stood with her, a partner, a protector, and, in time, perhaps the one who could share the weight of the destiny that had fallen upon her shoulders. "The storm has passed," Kale murmured, voice low, resonant. "But the fire, it's yours. Always yours. No one can take it." Aria nodded, silver eyes reflecting both exhaustion and quiet triumph. She thought of the council who had denounced her, the rival alphas who had sought to undermine her, and the shadow beasts that had dared to challenge her. All of them had underestimated her, all of them had doubted her power. And now, in this moment, she understood fully, power was not just strength. It was choice, control, and courage. "I am no longer hiding," she said softly, voice steady, carrying the echo of the fire that had defined her. "I am the silver flame. I am the Alpha I was meant to be. And I will protect those I love, and those who cannot protect themselves." Kale's hand found hers again, and this time, he did not speak. There was no need. The unspoken connection between them, years of longing, fear, trust, and subtle attraction, blazed brighter than any flame. He nodded once, sharply, eyes locked with hers, a silent vow that no matter the trials to come, they would face them together. The forest around them stirred, leaves whispering in the morning wind, as if recognizing the dawn of a new era. Birds lifted from branches, their songs hesitant but brave, carrying the pulse of life that had survived the night's chaos. Somewhere deep in the ruins, faint tremors still whispered of hidden forces, ancient powers waiting, observing, aware of the silver flame that now fully walked the earth. Aria lowered herself to the stone, tail brushing the ground, breathing in the scent of earth and ash, fire and frost. Her thoughts were not on vengeance or fear, but on possibility. For the first time in her life, she could see the horizon not as a boundary of exile or danger, but as an invitation. The prophecy she had been tied to, the power she had claimed, the fire she had embraced, it was not a burden. It was a choice. And with Kale beside her, she felt for the first time in years, the warmth of home, of belonging, of love that had survived the darkness. Kale crouched next to her, his gaze sweeping the ruins, the forest, the horizon beyond. "You've changed everything tonight," he said quietly. "The world will not be the same, because you are not the same." Alara's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "I am not afraid anymore," she admitted. "I may never be completely understood. But I am ready. And I will stand. Always." For a moment, they simply sat in silence, two figures amidst the ruins, two souls bound by fire, blood, and destiny. The silver flame pulsed faintly along Alara's fur, mingling with the warmth of the rising sun, a symbol not of destruction but of renewal. Shadows no longer pressed close, the threat had passed, if only temporarily. Yet the knowledge of greater challenges lingered, a distant drumbeat on the edge of her awareness. The prophecy was not complete, but its first verse had been written tonight, and she had claimed her place in it. Kale shifted closer, nudging her gently. "You have awakened something in the world, and in me," he whispered, voice almost trembling with emotion. "Something that cannot be undone. You've shown me what it means to fight, to claim power, and to love without fear. And I will stand with you. Always." Aria turned her gaze to his, silver meeting amber, and in that instant, the weight of years, betrayal, pain, and loneliness lifted, replaced by the fierce, unbreakable bond that had been forged in fire. "And I will not be alone," she said firmly. "Never again. Not while the fire burns, not while the blood runs through me, not while you stand beside me." They rose together, bodies moving in perfect synchronicity, and with each step, the forest seemed to awaken in response. Trees stretched taller, leaves glimmered in the new light, and the ruins themselves shimmered faintly, recognizing the rise of a true alpha. The world was no longer a place of exile and fear. It was a place of potential, of power, of love and loyalty tempered by fire. And as they disappeared into the mist at the edge of the ruins, the wind whispered faintly, carrying a final promise for the future, a note of suspense, and the undeniable pulse of destiny yet to be fulfilled. "This isn't over, the silver flame has risen. And the true alpha will walk the earth unstoppable and unbroken." The sun rose higher, spilling light across the forest, across the ruins, across the path of two wolves, one silver, one amber-eyed, bound by fire, blood, and love that had been tested in the crucible of betrayal and triumph. The story may have paused, but the legend had only begun. And somewhere, beyond the horizon, the world waited, eager, wary, and unprepared for the rise of the alpha and the girl who had claimed her destiny.